A while ago I made an alphabet and a video walking you through that process and my thoughts behind it. Now it's time to get practical about it and look at how this alphabet is actually used. In this video I'll talk about how to write, from the tools and materials used to what direction you write in and what punctuation we have. The purpose of these videos is to show you practical world building. I'm not after impressing you with the depth and skill with which I world build, and I'm certainly not here to tell you that this is how you have to do things. I just want to show you the thought process behind my world building to give you a practical example that maybe you can take something from when you do your own. Let's get into it, starting with tools and materials. This is a rune alphabet, and runes in our world were often carved in wood, although most of the surviving runes in our time are those that were carved into stone. There are also items made of bone, horn, and other more durable materials that have survived with runes on them, but the shape of the runes came from the fact that you'd carve them into wood. That's why there are no horizontal lines, because that would go against the grain of the wood and be very difficult to carve. So it's natural to think that the rune alphabet in the world of my story also began as something carved into wood. I imagine it would have been mostly short messages and notes. Imagine anything that you might write on a post-it. So that's how it started many, many years ago as this story takes place. Even now, I believe it's still largely carved in those kinds of materials, like wood, bone, horn, and stone. But I do also want this culture to have paper and books, because it's the kind of culture that I think would need that. But they don't have the printing press, however, so everything is still handwritten. The paper would probably be either parchment of some sort made of animal hides or paper made from cloth fiber. That's the earliest kind of paper that was used here in the Nordics, and this world is largely based on our culture here, so I think that makes sense. The ink would probably be the simple kind that's made from soot and honey, for example. And I'm sure there are also different varieties with different qualities and different cost, but the only thing I really need to know at this point is what kind of ink my characters would be using, and I think that's the simple kind that they can make on their own. The tools for writing with ink on paper would be brushes made from wood and animal hairs, and of course the tools for carving the runes into wood or even stone would be knives for the former and chisels for the latter. Potentially some sort of color to make it easier to read, because that was fairly common, at least for rune stones. Speaking of runestones, let's talk about what direction this alphabet is written in. We are used to alphabets that are written horizontally from left to right, like our Latin one, horizontally from right to left, like Arabic, or vertically from top to bottom, like the traditional Chinese and Japanese ones. Runestones, at a first glance, are complicated, and sometimes it looks like you've got a knot or a tangle of runes with no indication of where you should start reading. I mean, look at this. It is so weird. So it seems like there wasn't a clear rule for this in ancient times here. Sometimes the line the runes were carved in is an animal shape, like a snake, and it seems relatively common that you should start reading the runes at the head of the animal. But then there's another school of thought where you should start in the lower left corner. So since there's no clear and fast rule, sometimes you have to start reading somewhere and see if that makes sense. For me, for the world I'm created, I decided to simplify things somewhat. Or maybe complicate them, who knows. The alphabet is used in two different ways. As an alphabet to write down messages, and in magic to create spells. So I decided that the runes are written in different ways depending on what you're using them for. For everyday use, I decided it should be fairly simple, either vertical or horizontal. I entertained the idea that it would be circular, because that's what runestones kinda look like, but I decided that that was too impractical. Would you be turning the page to be able to read, or would it go from written horizontally left to right, then vertically top to bottom, horizontally right to left, and then vertically bottom to top, and so on? I'm sure it could have been done, and it could have been really fascinated, but for this everyday use, I wanted something simpler. Then it was a toss-up between horizontal and vertical, but I decided on vertical from bottom to top, left to right, so that you start reading in the lower left corner, which is still a nod to the runestones. When runes were commonly used around here, we didn't have books, so there weren't really long texts written in runes, but like I said, in this world I wanted them to have books, so I needed to figure out how that would work. So I tried writing a short text in runes from the bottom left, and it worked. And above all, it looked very nice, since all of the runes have a vertical line, which also gave me an idea as to why you write like this. The vertical line is the world tree, as I've mentioned before, and you write it this way from bottom to top, because that's how the world tree and other things in nature grows, from the ground and up towards the sky. And I think that was pretty clever. It ties into the fact that nature is very important to this culture. So you write them that way, and I also believe that that means that books are turned not from left to right or right to left, but upwards, more like we'd turn a notepad. That was everyday use. Now for how to write when you're doing magic with these runes. For magical use, I am leaning more towards the runestones and a slightly more chaotic way of writing. I'll get into more detail on this in the video about magic, but as a short run-through, the way that the runes are written will affect the spell you're casting. This means the direction and the material used, but it also means things like the runes' relative size to each other, depth of carving, and the order in which you write them or carve them. So you might write them in a different order than the one they would be read in, depending on the effect that you want from the spell. So as a general rule, spells are written more like runestones, and there is no hard and fast rule where you should start reading them. Potentially because they're not really meant to be read as such. They're meant for the gods, not for other people. And the gods work differently than human minds, so they don't need a clear rule. They'll understand anyway. Plus, they probably saw you carve it, so. The more advanced you want to make the spell, the more complicated the writing or carving is, and the harder it is for others later to interpret the spells. So two spells that look exactly the same, but where the runes were carved in a different order, might have slightly or even vastly different effects. Again, I'll have a video on magic where I go a bit more into detail with this. Subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss it. Now for punctuation. This alphabet is based on runes found in the Nordics, especially in Sweden, and I haven't cared too much about regional differences or differences in how old the runes are when I've done my research. I've just read about it and taken things I like from wherever or whenever. What my research did find is that, just like in what direction you should read, old rune carvings were also pretty inconsistent about punctuation. You could put a colon or a dot or an X between words or nothing at all, not even the space that we put between words, making it that much harder to read. Punctuation between sentences seemed to have been even more rare. Now this makes sense. Like I said, for most of the history of runes, they weren't used to write longer texts, so having inconsistent or non-existent punctuation was fine. But in my world, I want them to be able to write longer chunks, and then I feel like they need at least a bit of punctuation. At least between sentences, if not between words. Ideally, I would have liked to start writing and see where it felt natural to put some punctuation, but in order to do that, I would have had to properly learn the alphabet. And I will say right now, I don't know this alphabet inside and out. I couldn't just start writing or reading them without a cheat sheet. I haven't had time to sit down and actually learn it. So I had to make some guesses. I did want something between the words to make it easier to read, be that a space or something else, and to stay true to the tradition of runes, I decided to go with a symbol. Again, symbols that were usually used were dots, X's, colons, and so on. It seemed to be up to the individual. Again, fine at the time, but in this society where writing runes is more common and longer text can be made, I wanted it to be standardized. But I also didn't want to make things too complicated and make an equivalent of every single form of punctuation that we have, so I settled on three things. Something between the words, something between the sentences, and something to indicate a question. I felt like those were the three most important things. So, taking inspiration from old runes, I went with a dot for between the words, an X between sentences, and to indicate a question, I did an X with two dots. Think an X on top of a colon. An X to indicate the end of a sentence, and the two dots to give the impression of hesitation. Maybe inspired by our ellipses? I don't really know. And I want to point out that these 3 forms of punctuation is probably not all there actually is. I imagine they would have something like a comma and all of those other things as well, and maybe I'll come up with those at a later time if it seems necessary. Because just like with any other world building, there is a point where it goes from being thorough to just procrastinating. I could continue. I could figure out the equivalent of the comma, the exclamation point, the colon, the semicolon, em-dash, parentheses, and so on and so forth. They probably exist. And if the writing system becomes a big part of this book, I will have to revisit this, but I don't think it will. And so spending time and energy on every little detail would just be procrastination. It would be fun, but not necessarily beneficial to the story. How beneficial exactly what I've got so far will be, I honestly don't know. I need to know some of these things, I want to know the rest, and I feel like this world building has, if nothing else, deepened my understanding of the world. Even if most of these details don't make it into the story, I feel more secure about the world, I feel like I know it better, and I feel like I've gotten to a point where I think my portrayal of the world will be better because I have this information. I'm not quite done with the writing system. Like I said before, I will go into more detail in a later video on how this alphabet is used in a magical setting. Also, while coming up with the information in this video, I realized that I have not considered numbers. That's not weird. Numbers weren't a thing in the old rune alphabets that I've been taking inspiration from. You just spell out the numbers if you wanted to put them in. But for this world, I feel like they need a more efficient way to represent numbers, because spelling out larger numbers is way too much effort, and this is a society that will have a use for being able to represent larger numbers in written form. So a video is coming up on how I came up with numbers. I hope I'll see you there. Thank you for watching, be safe, I will see you next time.